Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode where we're going to be discussing hybrid personal training. But first of all, let me tell you why we're talking about this today. So last week, I had the pleasure of speaking alongside some FitPro experts at the FitPro Summer Summit at Brentford FC in London. Now, that entire summit was all about the future of the fitness industry. And we had experts in from all different parts of the industry, talking about all sorts of different things. And I was asked to go in there to talk a little bit about hybrid personal training, which is where you mix online personal training and in-person face-to-face training together to try and really make the most of these two amazing areas in the industry. And the thing I was talking about was a topic called floor to phone. And this is where you can actually add in an online element to your gym or face-to-face training business and actually increase your client retention. In fact, in most cases, more than double your client retention in 90 days just by adding in a few simple systems. So if you've ever thought about including online personal training with your business, whether that's going to be an add-on to your existing business, whether you want to use it to help support your clients you're currently working with face-to-face, whether it's a gym, a studio, or just as a personal trainer in a normal box gym, then this episode is going to be for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring up the slides from that presentation that I did last week. And more than just showing you a recording with all the background questions and things going on, I'm actually going to break it down with you today. I'm going to go into all the data and just talk about exactly how and why you should be thinking of including online personal training as part of your personal training business. So without further ado, let's go and look at the screen. Let's dig into the slides and let's see exactly how you can move from floor to phone in your fitness business. So here we are now up on the screen. You can see here we're going to be digging into this topic, which is the floor to phone, the system that doubled client retention in 90 days. Now, before I dig into this, I think it's important we have a little bit of concept for people that are even new to the channel, new to seeing me, new to who I'm actually am and why you should really be listening to me. I want to dig into a little bit about that and explain how I got to where I am today and where this actual presentation comes from. First of all, my background is in coaching. Most people think I'm more of a tech person. I am. I love tech. I love systems. And I do enjoy doing that kind of thing. But I'm actually by trade a coach. I actually started coaching out in the adventure industry, then very quickly moved into the fitness industry a few years later. And as part of that, I actually owned a studio. I had quite a successful studio with my business partner, and we transitioned to small group training. But we found that was actually still very overworked in the studio. Things like onboarding was taking too long. We started missing things. Support between sessions was kind of patchy. There was no real structure to it. And our short rates were dipping. So even though we had some success within our personal training business in our studios, even though we started transitioning to use small group training because we knew there was more money to be made there, it didn't limit our scalability, we were still feeling very, very overworked. And then a turning point kind of happened, and we had this kind of accidental success with a hybrid model. At the time, we didn't even know it was a hybrid model or what was even doing. I mean, online was still pretty much a brand new thing. So we started experimenting with this hybrid online model, not to go online. We had no intentions at the time of being online trainers, but to try and make things smoother. So first of all, we started to automate the onboarding and booking systems. We then looked at adding in nutrition and habit support outside of the sessions. Next, we then introduced micro check-ins and daily touch points. I'm going to dig into those a little bit later on in more detail. And then we start looking at how we could build small teams of our clients for increased accountability. And then finally, we layered in remote training plans that we could customize in seconds for our clients. Now, all this stuff I'm talking about here didn't happen straight away. We didn't just go there and think, okay, we're just going to get this done. This happened over the space of about a year or so, I think it was. But what I want to do is break all these down with you through this presentation, show exactly what we did, and maybe help you try and do some of similar things as well for your business. So what we did really here was create a hybrid model, which had group pricing, but still gave one-to-one results, even in a group format. Most importantly, what it did, it gave us more autonomy. So both me and my business partner, we had a lot more control over how we spent our time and when we spent our time. And that autonomy was extremely important for both of us, especially for me, who really wanted to go traveling and start seeing the world. I needed to find a way of doing it and have control over my time. And this really helped us do that. So let's just fast forward a little bit. That was my experience and kind of why I introduced this kind of hybrid online element into our gyms and studios and my face-to-face personal training. But that's not about why I'm here. And I think it's important you understand how I actually got from that to what I'm doing now, because it does seem like a bit of a jump. And it's not the standard story that you probably hear from people. So let's just quickly dig into it. So the studio we had was over a decade ago. This is a long time ago. Things may have changed since then, especially in terms of technology. And I would do think it's important to understand that the fundamentals of business and systems and everything like that is always going to be the same. That's never really going to change. However, the medium in which we deliver those things is changing all the time. And more so than ever, it's changing rapidly. I think that's an important thing to understand. So before I dig in and say this is what I did 10 years ago, I want you to understand why I'm talking about what I'm talking about today and why it is actually relevant in today's market. So as we ran a gym and studio, eventually I did start taking things online and I started coaching people online, realized I actually enjoyed that kind of thing and wanted to go all in at it. So I left the studio with my lovely business partner, and that studio is still running, still successful today. It's moved to new locations, but the guy that runs it, absolutely amazing job at that. However, I went online, started coaching people online, got some great results from people, made a really good income from doing that, and really enjoyed what I was doing. And eventually, as I was doing this, new software was starting to come out in the online world, and I wanted to find ways to really systemize things a little bit better. So I was still doing quite a few manual things. I was having to kind of patch together lots of different software to make this work. And eventually I found Peter Distinction after trying a few of the different software. Now, at the time, Peter Distinction was a brand new software, had not been out for very long. And I started using it, loved it, and managed to make it do some pretty cool things. And that's what I really liked about it, the flexibility of it, the ability to adapt to just stuff and kind of make it do whatever I wanted to make it do. Now, at the time, Facebook groups wasn't even a thing. And Facebook decided to bring Facebook groups out. And of course, Peter Distinction guys set up a Facebook group, and I got invited into it as a client of theirs. So I came into that Facebook group, and people are asking questions, as you do in groups. And I just started answering them, saying, oh, you could do this. You ever thought about doing this? This is how I'd market that. This is the system I use for this. This is how I'd set this up in the Peter Distinction software. This is how I'll do this with the Peter Distinction software. And the guys that owned it took notice. And eventually I put a post up, or somebody posted, and I commented, and the owner of Peter Distinction said, I didn't even realize you could do that for our own software. And that's kind of where our conversation started. Out the back of that, we started doing masterclasses, and this was a bit of a kind of a side hustle thing to my online business at the time. I never expected it to go anywhere. I never expected to do what I'm doing now from this. But they just asked, can you run some masterclasses for us? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I started running these masterclasses around the software, around getting started as an online fitness business. And those masterclasses still run today, 8 years later. Wow, they still run today. Out of those masterclasses, I think probably the second or third one in, people started asking questions. And the question was, can you just do it for us, Ash? Like, can't you just go and set these things up so it's done? And I was like, yeah, can't see why not. So we decided to launch Peter the Ninja, which was the company that ran the masterclasses. And we decided to run a done for you service. And that was for specifically Peter Distinction. At the time, it was anyway. And what we effectively did there was we spoke to trainers, to coaches, to gym owners, but anybody who wanted to deliver their service online. So what do you want setting up? And fundamentally, what we set up was their idea. They'd say what they want. I'd say, technically, is this possible, yes or no? And if it was, I'd go out there and build it and set it up for them, and they'd be going their merry way, reading the systems and processes that they want. And this got really, really popular very, very quickly. And eventually, I decided to go all in on this. I stopped doing my online training, and I became like a full-time PTD ninja. Eventually, we started noticing things. I'm a bit of a data geek, and I started noticing patterns. And I noticed that for the majority of businesses that were successful with the systems that we set up, they all followed the same kind of process. They actually had the same way of doing lead generation, same kind of systems in place, same way of approaching their business, same way of delivering content, same structure to their content, same upsell systems, everything. It was weird. It really was. I mean, I'd say more than 80% of the successful businesses followed that model or a version of that model. That's like, well, there's got to be something in this. So what we decided to do was build a course. And this course was all about how to set up Peter Distinction and your online fitness business using the Peter Distinction software. But basically, the software was just a tool. We had all the training inside this course for it, but it was mainly just a tool. So what the course really did was show you those fundamentals around what's having place for your business, what you need to do, how do you go and market, how do you go and get new leads, how do you build the systems for this, how do you coach people online, how do you do this in the way it's going to take you minutes per client per week, how do you actually become successful as an online personal trainer and coach. And we built that course from all the data. So this wasn't just from my experience at all. This was from the experience of thousands of personal trainers that we had worked with through masterclasses and through done-for-you services, taking all that data and developing a course from it. And that course is still led by that same data that's constantly being updated as well. So you can still get that course today. It's called our OPTC course. You can buy it from our website, Repeatedly Ninja, and to get into it, and it gives you everything you need, including all the white label content systems and everything. So we launched that course. Eventually, if people were going for the course, like, Ash, can't you just go and set this stuff up for me? So it was like, yes. So we launched something called our Gold Done For You service. We ran the beta version of that. And that was basically setting up all the technical side of it for our clients. It was like doing things like sales pages for them, all the integrations to make all the automations happen, actually setting up their coaching programs, putting all the content in there, had all our white label content we edited out, but everything was done. So by the time we was done, our Gold Done For You members had access to our course, and then they also had all their sales pages, their lead magnets, their landing pages, their automations, their payment systems, their coaching content for not just their front end offers, but also for their back end offers. In fact, they had nearly 2 years worth of coaching content pre-built out, ready to use. Then we provided training on how to use it effectively. And then we also did something called advanced support, where we actually worked with them over 90 days to adapt and adjust it. And again, as well as adapting and adjusting it and working with them over those advanced support phases, we took that data and we developed things even more. And at the back of that, we launched our academy, which was then a support service for this. So people could just get support as long as they needed to in terms of not just running the business, but also the technical side of it as well. So at the back of that, we then launched our mastery program, which was more kind of our one-to-one services that I offer. And then we started doing something called our hybrid DFI, which was a beta test. And this is really where we took all this different data, all our experience working with different personal trainers and different gyms, and tested out a version where we would go in there and build out a system I'm going to share with you today, apply it into those gyms and see what would happen. And that is what that's what we're going to share you today. That's what I'm going to go with you today. Go show you that data, show the results, show you what we did. And hopefully you can apply those same things to your business as well. And the beauty of it is you should make more profit without actually charging more money. So let's dig into it and find out. But before we dig into that, now you understand a bit of our background and that it's not just me saying go and do what I did. We need to understand why you should be doing this, why the market is actually starting to change. So why now? And it's because the future is coming, whether you like it or not. And most coaches and PTs, well, in all honesty, I think they actually have it wrong. I think they expect the future to be a lot different than what it's actually going to be. So the first thing I want to talk about is saturation. When I talk about online training with anybody, or even including an online element, or even just fitness in general, people go like, the industry is so saturated. Like, we literally hear this all the time. But I think we need to have an honest discussion about saturation. We really, really do here. Because if we were doing a good job, if it was a saturated market, if it really was as saturated as people make it out to be, and we're doing a good job, why are we seeing this? Why are we seeing 1 billion adults globally living with obesity? Why are over 63% of UK adults overweight? And why is physical inactivity and stress-related behaviors literally at an all-time high? When you put all these things together, that's not the sign of a saturated market. And if it is a saturated market, then as fitness professionals, we are failing everywhere around the world. And I don't think that's true. I think there's a reason for this. And to me, it's not that there's saturation. I just think there's a mismatch between what people need and what they're actually getting. And I think a lot of that actually comes down to how we're marketing to people. This is probably going to rub some people up the wrong way. And I don't know what the true answer is here. I know how you can market ethically. I know how you can bring in sales. I know you can do certain things that you see on the screen now I'm about to talk through with you that will make it a hell of a lot easier to make a hell of a lot of money a lot quickly. But I want to explain what the problem is and why this is leading to this change, especially the next bit I'm about to talk to you about. We pretty much sell people what they want and give them what they need. But this basically leads to broken expectations. So for example, you can see on the screen here, you can lose 20K in just 4 weeks, or 30 days and drop 20K, or Jay's 6-week shred challenge. Now, there's nothing wrong with these things in reality. And you might think they're innocent, like they're just a starting point. And as coaches, we look at that and think, yeah, well, surely they must know it's just a starting point. Like, unless they continue working with us, they're never really going to keep this stuff off. That's fine. And it's true. And we can put as much education out there as we want to around this. But therein lies the problem. The problem is that this is what people are seeing. And if you've done any kind of marketing before in the past, if you run ads, for example, let's say that you have 1,000 impressions of your ads. And in reality, you're probably going to get like a handful of people out of those thousands, maybe like if you're lucky, 50 of them might click on that ad and that link. maybe 10 of them might sign up to it. And out of the people that sign up to it, maybe 2 of them will then continue on to go and work with you. That's the problem, because 1,000 people have seen those ads and people run those ads everywhere. So 1,000 people are now thinking the industry expectation is to lose 20K in 30 days, or to do a 6-week shred, or to take a GLP-1, or whatever it is. And that's the expectation that's set, because that's what they're seeing all the time, because not necessarily clicking on the stuff yet, or they may be clicking on it and exploring it a little bit and going through the sales copy about how good these programs are, but never actually following through with them. Or even if they do follow through with them, they just click on it because they feel by doing so, it takes them a little step closer, but they don't actually action anything. So they're not really getting the results. It means they're not continue working with you. So thousands of people are seeing these things, and for every 1,000 people that see these advertisements, probably one person truly understand what's involved in terms of keeping and getting those results. And that's the problem. People's expectations have now changed, and this is the norm. So we are seeing a market where people think this is the norm. It's about low cost, fast weight loss results, or muscle building results, or whatever it is. It's unsustainable results they're going to get, but that's the expectation. And that's the biggest issue we have at the moment, because what that's leading to is this AI tsunami that is going to be coming. Because AI is allowing companies, big companies, to go off the back of this. They know people are interested in it because of the marketing that's out there. And they know they can offer certain things to help and support them for the long term, extremely cheap or free. And there's a huge AI boom happening now, which I'm sure everybody here listening to this will know about. And it's getting bigger and bigger. And the important thing to remember here is I'm going to share some different technologies with you here now. The important thing to remember is that this is the worst it's going to get. AI is never going to be as bad as it is now. It's only going to get better in terms of its abilities. Only going to get better. So this here is like black and white television. That's what this is. Probably not. It's just like radio. It's that old stuff. It's only going to get better, and it's moving fast. So let's just talk about some of the tech that's around now. So as of next year, or maybe even early on this year, so Apple's AI Workout Buddy is going to come out. This is a fully interactive trainer. It's going to be available as a freemium service built directly into one of the most popular phones ever built. So many people are going to have access to this. They're going to get marketed to it instantly. The moment they on board with their phone, they're going to go and see this. And they can pay a very small amount of money, or even use the free ones, and they can get coached. It will adapt to just workouts to suit them based on their data that comes through. It'll give them videos. It will interact with them back. Like, it's literally going to give them the same thing that the majority, in all honesty, of coaches give people. In fact, it's probably going to give them more. They're going to get that 24/7 in their pocket of real-time data. And that's the issue. You see, AI itself can write meal plans and give nutrition advice better than what most PTs can. And it can do it because it pulls some information instantly, real-time information that's most up-to-date, and it can deliver it to them based on real-time information instantaneously. PTs can't do that. We can't give people that real-time feedback. Somebody on the other side of the world can't ask you a question about whether they can eat something and you respond straight away. That can do that instantly, and it's free, or it's extremely cheap, which means that's the kind of thing you're going to be competing with if you go against this. So the key thing here in our industry is to start understanding about how you can leverage this stuff. It's about how you can actually stand out in this kind of market. And there's definitely a way to go and do that online, and there's definitely a way to go do that with a hybrid model as well. And I think both online and hybrid models are needed. I'm not going to dig too much into the online side of this. I'll do another video on that. Once it's done, I'll post around here so you can see it, which will dig into the difference between AI trainers and online coaches, which I think is where the market's going to be going over the next few years, and how to really make the most of that. Because I honestly think this is the best opportunity for online trainers and coaches that there ever has been. You've just got to know how to use it properly. So I'll dig into that in a different video. But like I said, there's different tech coming out there. And even for gyms and studios, if you get a chance to have a look at this, look for Lumen.fitness. Lumen.fitness is a fully AI automated studio. So it means it has AI personal trainers training people in the studio. The owner of Lumen literally came out and said studios will not need all those trainers and coaches in there anymore. You could literally have effectively a flight attendant, saving the studios literally a ridiculous amount of money on staffing and wages, because you can have almost like a flight attendant trainer that oversees this entire studio that's ran by AI. This is just the beginning, by the way. Think about how advanced it's going to get with AI and robotics and things that are coming out at the moment. And I just think by 2026, AI-generated workouts, habits, nutrition coaching that adapted instantly, this is going to be the norm. This is going to be the standard expectation. This is the minimum that people are going to expect from anybody, whether it's in the gym or whether it's fully online. So clients are going to expect real-time customization. They're going to expect instant responses, and they're going to want some level of 24/7 support. And they're often going to want this for free or extremely cheap. And that's because of everything we've talked about already. That's where the market is going. But here's the important thing. AI delivers plans, humans deliver change. And it's one line I really want you to remember, that put that into your head. AI delivers plans, humans delivers change. AI, of course, can give these macros, the workouts, the habit scores, whatever it is, but it still can't do, at least not yet, the nuances of coaching, especially if you've got a very specific niche that you're working with. It doesn't always understand the full context of which things are happening. So yes, it can look at the data, but can it look at subjective data in the same way that humans can? Can it apply empathy? Well, theoretically, it can write like it's applying empathy, but can it actually be as empathetic as a real human at the moment? No, it can't. And coaching like only a human can. And what I mean by that is, even if you take out everything, even if it advances to the point where it can do all the stuff we're talking about here, it can't be a human, because you can't, a human can let AI down. You can't let a human down. And I think that's an important thing to try and remember here, because if you take apps like, a lot of people use the Duolingo app for learning a language, it's annoying when you don't keep up with it, and it makes you feel pretty bad if you don't keep up with it. But eventually, if you just want to stop doing it, you'll stop doing it, because it's a computer, it's a robot, it's not real. But if you start working with a human coach and you know you're letting a person down, that's always going to be different. So it is important that we have that human element in everything that we do. And that's why I wouldn't be too worried. So what does this give you? Well, this gives you three options. We can either do nothing and probably lose clients over the next few years. We can compete on price, which I promise you is a race to the bottom. Or if you're a gym, studio, personal trainer, you can build a hybrid option. So build hybrid and stay human and literally win with results. Because you are not going to beat AI by being faster or cheaper. You're going to beat it by being irreplaceable as a human being. So let's have a quick look at the floor to phone framework that we put together and what we're trying to do with this beta project. So we had 3 layers. We kind of had a bonus layer we ended up putting in eventually, but we'll talk about all of those now. So this model that we use changed literally everything in terms of how we approach things, and it all really made big differences to businesses we work with. So we had our connection layer. So these are micro touch points with check-ins and messaging. We then had an accountability layer. So this was things like habit tracking and automations. We then had the content layer, which was all about evergreen coaching content, so like videos, guides, FAQs, that kind of thing. Very interactive as well. And then we included a community layer. So these kind of like bonus layers we put in, which was a team-based accountability and engagement system that we set up. And all of this supported clients during the sessions and between sessions as well. So what did a day look like for the gyms and studios we started working with? Well, let's look at the old model. This is what most of them were like when they first came to us. So the old model was they would show up, they would have the session, the client would, and then they leave. And for all intents and purposes, pretty much the support ended at the gym floor, at the gym door. So once you left the gym or the studio, that's kind of where the support ended. Pop them a few nuances, a bit of tips and advice now and again, but that was pretty much it. They'd check in with them when they came back in for the next session. The hybrid model we then looked at was this. They would show up, they get coached, supported throughout the week, and their coaching pretty much lives in their pocket. So they was held accountable and coached to support all the time, both in the gym studio and outside. So the same coach, we just had a better way of delivering. Now, most of all the studios we work with were small group model studios. They're the ones we started focusing on. So small group model studios, because the bigger box gyms these days, if you're a PT in there, almost all of them have their own apps. Now, they all do. They're ahead of the game here. You've just got to look at that to see what their expectations. They know if you don't have that, you're a step behind. So this is really for the small group PT models, gyms, or if you're doing your own personal training with people. So most studios heavily rely on in-person delivery to generate profit. In fact, all the people we spoke to on this beta program were in that same situation. It was all about in-person delivery. That's how they generated profit. The problem is this creates bottlenecks in both time, staffing, and client retention. So some of the typical problems that they're coming across was the profit was limited by physical hours. So if you want more profit, you need to hire more people, which means you have limits on your margins. The client drop-off on average for these gyms, well, across all kind of small group gyms, is around 7 to 9 months. And this is based on UK active data. And most of the gyms we were working with were actually falling around this kind of figure, the 7 to 9 month mark. So it was pretty accurate data. The admin time in these things eats into your margins. So it's very easy for your admin to go over the top, especially as clients start to leave and you're following up and you're chasing up for no-shows. a lot of that gets eaten away into the margins, making the margins less. So when we actually look at the data properly, the typical margins for these kind of gyms is around 20 to 40%. That's based on UK active. And again, the gyms we're working with were roughly falling into that range as well. So let's just talk quickly about the beta studios. As you know, Peter Ninja is all about the data. So we test, we adapt and implement. And if we wanted to offer a new hybrid done for you service to gyms and studio owners and personal trainers, we needed to know if it was worth it to them. So about a year ago, we decided to try out the hybrid model with a handful of our clients. And here is what happened when we actually did that. So let's look at the current numbers. These were the averages over the beta studios that we took on. So the baseline small group PT model, the average group size was 6 clients. The average sessions was technically like 2.3, I think it was. So we're going to say 2 to 3 sessions per week. The average was £150 a month per client. They were paying for the small group model. The assistant coach cost was around £30 per hour. I'm not saying they all got paid £30 per hour, but when you take into account the direct costs, the overheads, the wages, all those different things that come into that, then it was around £30 an hour. And then other direct costs was roughly around £25 to £30 per client per month. That's what we're looking at to the data-wise. So if we break this down per client, just to make life a little bit easier, the revenue was on average £150. The cost of managing and running a client was roughly around £65. And then down here, our gross profit was roughly around £85 or 56.6% margin is what most of them were actually getting on there when we break all this down. Per client, this is obviously per client small group model. So we asked ourselves this question first, and all our studios, like, what if we could add value without actually adding in more sessions? So the first aim of this beta program was to add more value without adding more sessions or time from the coach. So we introduced this hybrid model first with online coaching and with some smart automation. So with no extra physical cost, we added in weekly check-ins, nutrition coaching, habit tracking, support outside of the sessions, missed session follow-up, and an online community for accountability. And we did this in 2 ways. We did this with a full studio online group, and we also did this with individual groups as well because it's a small group studio, and we'll explain more on that a little bit later on. So why does this matter? Well, retention, because retention equals profit and more money in your bank. So what we wanted to do, and one point what we wanted to do was increase not just the amount of profit they was making for each client, but also increase the amount of retention they was doing. And this really is your hidden profit lever. So let's look at some data here for our kind of existing gyms. So the pure gym style memberships, the average retention is 3 to 6 months unless they signed into a contract. Even then, it's still around 3 to 6 months. People will sign to a contract, they'll stop training, and they'll just waste half the year paying for something they're not using, which a lot of gyms do rely on. You'll be surprised how they work out, how much capacity they can have and memberships they sell and stuff like that. You've then got one-to-one PT clients. This is typically 4 to 8 months. This is normally to do with results are given relatively quickly through this and also just cost implications, but there are ways to make sure you can retain people if you get this right. And then small group PT, which is what we're talking about mainly here, so these are studios. It's normally between 6 to 10 months, the realistic average. So with many successful models, clients are normally staying around 12 months plus if there's community and coaching are very strong, which having this online support here is going to help you actually achieve as well. And again, I put all the references down the bottom if anyone's interested about where this data's come from. So let's just break down what we actually did when it comes to just the time-saving side of things. So these are the key areas we focused on: onboarding, check-ins, nutrition support, follow-ups, and programming. We figured if we could tackle these things first, then it would start saving people a lot of time and making people more money. So onboarding, the average times was around 30 minutes, and we added in our systems. Onboarding for a client went down to 5 minutes on average. Weekly check-ins on average was around 15 minutes. It now went down to 2 minutes on average. Nutrition support was 20 minutes. It now went down to 0. Absolute 0. Nothing. There's nothing they need to do to support them in nutrition once we've got these new systems in place. Adjustments on programming, around 20 minutes per average on it. We got it down to 5 minutes on average. And then missed session follow-ups was roughly around 10 minutes, and we dropped this down to 1 minute. So if we look at like time-wise, roughly it was around an hour and a half, and we dropped this down to around 15 to 20 minutes. So if we take the average rate of the BTO studios of sort of £30 an hour, after implementation, around £30 to £40 was saved per client per month, just by making some small tweaks here. Again, this is taken from data we've got from the Peak Distinction software that we used to set these up for clients, but also it's based on some benchmark settings that we took from our studios as well that was working with. So I want to break down now the actual things that we did, talk about some of the things we included, and I want you to have an opportunity. So at the live event we had a workbook there. just grab yourself a pen and paper. You can make some notes down for yourself on here. So let's talk about what we did. And if you feel like you haven't done some of these things or you want to implement these things, just make a note of it now on a piece of paper. So in this onboarding example here, we first of all looked at automating from the studio. So we either use point of sale, sales calls, or online purchases. There was a mix across the studios. So we had to automate from that process onwards. So whether someone walked into the gym and paid there and then, whether it was done through a sales call after maybe a lead ad, or maybe it was just an online purchase to come across the website and sign up. We had to make sure that onboarding was exactly the same process, just triggered by different events. So that's what we did first. We then looked at how we could zero human cost the after-sales process. So in some cases, the humans were removed completely from the sales process, completely. So for things like online purchases, there was no need for any human interaction. So we could get down to zero in those cases. But in other cases, there was maybe POS stuff where the person at the gym behind reception was involved with that process. Maybe there's some sales calls as well, again, involved with that process. There were some time contributions to take into account there, hence the 5 minutes I was talking about earlier on. Next thing we did was we automatically sent out a custom branded app, and we had some onboarding things put in place, all completely automated. We didn't deliver all this at the same time. This was actually over an onboarding period, so we don't overwhelm the client. I'm going to break some of that stuff down in a moment, but let's just quickly run through these. So we had all the forms that was already set up. Any forms needed to complete was automatically delivered to them. We had an intro video with a studio tour in there and inductions as well. So the inductions were already signed off from the off before they even got into the studio in most cases. We had map and access info for the studio, so they knew exactly where to find it, where to go and park. There's no questions about anything. Just so simple and easy about how to get from where they are to the car park, into the studio, and where to go first. There was no guesswork left here. Literally, they knew exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it from this. We then had a way for them to book in their first session as well. So they had that all booked in with some automated follow-ups again, making sure when they turn up, they know what to bring with them, all those kind of things. We then had a what to expect in your first session. We did this as part of that follow-up process, just so they knew exactly what to expect when they got there, adding that clarity. Again, more on this structure and what I'm talking about here in a moment. We then got the starting data collected. So these are things like measurements and things like that. We had the client do all that, not the studio, people in the studio. Don't get the trainers to do it. There's no need. As long as they have consistency, it's fine in most cases. So we had them collecting that data, and they could track it over time as well. There's also benefits of that when it comes to some of the other advantages of doing this, which we'll talk about at the end. We then had community introductions. So we introduced them into the community before they even arrived at the gym so people could say hello. And we had systems in place to encourage them to go and sign up to and to get involved with like posting and that kind of thing. And then we had a group induction. So part of this process here was again working with small groups. So there's all in groups of sort of 5 or 6 people. We wanted to introduce them first. So there's actually put into small groups. We split them into these individual groups within the app. So each group that was trained together had their own mini group within that app. We gave them an activity, which was a naming icebreaker. So it was like, hey, just to get to know each other in here, they can talk and say hello to each other, but let's come up with a name for the group. So they came up with a name and gave it a name. And the beauty about that is now we had a leaderboard of these mini groups that was both in the studio, but also on the app too. So these different groups were then starting to work with each other. And if people miss sessions, then they wouldn't get the best adherence. If they wasn't adhering on the app, then they start losing those adherence points. And that's basically how we did this. We did this on adherence points. These mini groups would start competing against each other with prizes for the people that are doing the best. And if one person let down the group, guess what the rest of the group would do? They'd encourage them to get them back on track again. So it saved us a lot of time and accountability and actually dealing with clients and getting them to show up all the time. Our show up rates were much higher. Our retention rate was much higher. And we didn't really have to do half as much effort to make sure they actually turned up because the people in the groups were doing it. We then started looking at notifications and sequences to start looking at things like referrals, using a buddy system for referral, which I think some of you people might have known, which is like bring a friend along, get them into your own group and things like that. And then also asking for reviews, again, directly in the app. So all these things were fully automated, which means that not only was we onboarding them in terms of getting them into the app and ready, we had them talking about those gyms and studios with their friends. We had them giving us reviews, giving referrals, getting new people in. So again, the onboarding process not only helped with retention, but it helped us with sales as well, and as well as marketing. So all that was completely automated. The next thing we started looking at, and again, you can make some notes on this if you want to, is the check-ins. So we moved the main check-ins online more than doing them in person. And we fully automated using the traffic light system. Really, really simple process of green, amber, red. Green, you know the client's all good, so you don't really have to do much with them. Amber means you might need to make a few little tweaks, just keep an eye on it. And red means, okay, we need to have a chat. So either come to the studio, give them a call, give them some more detailed feedback, whatever it is. Makes it a lot easier to manage, and you know which clients to go and focus on more than spending too much time on every single client when they don't necessarily need it. And it also allows you to manage those expectations because the clients are seeing the system as well. They'll know if they're going to get big feedback or not much feedback. So it doesn't mean you have to always give them something all the time. It just means that the client has a good idea of what's going to happen next, again, adding that clarity. The next thing we started doing was splitting these into two key areas. We had tangible and subjective. So we had tangible tracking, which is more like adherence, progress photos, show rate, that kind of thing. And then we had subjective check-in, which is how the client is feeling. So why do we have both of these? Well, the thing is, tangible data tells you if they're getting a result or not. It tells you if they're progressing their lifts. It tells you if they're losing weight or whatever. And especially online, it's very difficult to know if that's going to be sustainable for them. And the same thing kind of happens with gyms and studios. So we took the data we have from our online check-ins and we apply this to studios because, yeah, you might have 5 or 6 people there, but they're motivated when they're in those sessions. And motivation can hide a multitude of sins when it comes to actual data and how people are feeling about things. So we need to find a way that we could check in with these clients individually, see not just if they're on the right track, but also how they're feeling about it. So even though their results could look great, going in the right direction, if they're struggling to keep up with things, or they're getting tired all the time or so on, then we need to know that as coaches. And if we can tackle that before it becomes an issue, happy days, their results are going in a straight direction. If we don't, we're going to see a lull in their results. And that's when adherence is going to drop, which is not good. So we have these subjective check-ins that are run separately from tangible ones. So tangible tracking is done kind of all the time, depending on what they're doing. Subjective check-ins were done once a week, really quick, really simple, 3 very simple questions, just generally about how the client is feeling. And the check-in process was really simple for each client. It took about, on average, 3 minutes per client to go and do. And by going through that process there, you could just check in, give some feedback if you needed to, and so on. I'm not saying every client was 3 minutes. Some was like literally no time at all. Others might have been 10, 15 minutes, but on average, it was around 3 minutes a client when they was doing this. And it just made sure that the adherence is going to be higher and people are going to be retained for longer by doing this. We then set up automated reminders and notifications for things like weekly results tracking, fortnightly progress photos. So they're handling it all themselves, getting reminders for all the time to make sure they keep on top of different things. And then the feedback was batched. And in most cases, fully automated. Though, like I said, most of the beta gym studios offered feedback when a red client was highlighted. Most amber clients were handled during sessions. Obviously, green ones don't really do anything. But both of these, whether it was through amber clients or through our red clients through this process, would often lead to upsells to more premium services. And we'll talk about this premium service at the end, that this kind of online element allows you to add in at very little cost with extremely high profit margins. So the check-ins we did. Next thing we did is we started looking at our nutrition support and adjusting programs. So I want to break down a 6-week front-end offer that was used by some of the beta gyms. The same principles we're talking about here work in back-end offer memberships as well. And also for all the kind of content we use during the onboarding, the check-in process. So it's the logic in which we decided how we're going to structure things for the online elements and stuff. So again, you can make some notes if you've got this, like I say, we talk about workbook here, but that's because it's from a live presentation, but you can make some notes here if you want to. So the first thing we want to look at is the actual approach to things. We want to look at the right approach to content. So we use SMART for that. So SMART is simple, measurable, accountable, results-driven, and transparent. The first thing you want to do is ask yourself, is this simple? Is this the minimum viable dose? So what you're putting in there, is it as simple as it could possibly be by still getting the result that they actually need? Anything more than that is an absolute waste of time. So make it as simple as you possibly can while still allowing the client to get the result. And just remember, simple doesn't always mean right. You've got to be effective. The key thing here is about being effective. Sometimes you have to hold things back to be more effective because your job is not to always be right all the time. Your job is to be as effective as possible at getting the client the result and keep it for as long as possible. So simple doesn't always mean it has to be completely correct. It just has to be effective in what it's doing. So just make sure it's the minimum viable dose to get the best outcome for your clients. That's what you're looking for here. Next thing is measurable for both the client and the program KPIs. So again, if it's simple enough, you should be able to measure it. If you can't measure something, then you've got no way of knowing if it's working. If you've got no way of knowing it's working, then why put it there in the first place? Because you don't know, it's not having any impact. Because if you can't measure something, then it's having no impact on the result that they're going to get. So it doesn't need to be there. So make sure you can actually measure it and figure out how either the client's going to measure it or you're going to measure it from a program KPI perspective. Next thing is it accountable? Can you hold the client accountable as daily, weekly, whatever it is? The beauty about having an online element to your face-to-face is that you can keep people accountable daily in these small micro touches, which we're going to dig into in a minute. And it's these small micro touches that remind them that they're there all the time and just keeps them moving forward, keep chipping things off. And literally just a few seconds a day, you can actually make sure your client's like, oh yes, I'm here, I'm doing this. This is front of mind all the time. That's going to give them better results. And again, if it's measurable, you should be able to hold them accountable to it. Next one, results driven. Always baffles me, this one. Really does. Everything should progress the client towards their goals. For some reason, especially with online, this doesn't always happen. Sometimes people just throw all sorts of stuff in there because they think more is better. It's not. Less is definitely more when it comes to any kind of training program, anything at all. Less is definitely more. So just make sure it's results driven. Ask yourself a very simple question. If my client takes action on this, and they should be able to take action. If they can't take action on something, they doesn't need to be there because it's not doing anything to help them. So if my client takes action on this particular thing, is it going to get them towards their result, the goal that they want? If it doesn't, take it out. If it has no relevance to them, take it out. It doesn't need to be there. Like if you think about this as a doctor, if you went into a GP or a doctor and they said to you like, oh, you can take this, and this. We've got all these different things. Which one do you want to go for? Which one do you want to use? You'd run a mile away because you want an expert telling you how to get the best result. But that's what you paid them for. That's what they're paying you for. So make sure it's results driven. And then finally, it needs to be transparent. Every single step needs to be crystal clear. We've talked about that clarity a lot already. So how do you do that? Well, you have this kind of structure, which is the what, why, how, when, and then. Really, really simple. And by following this, it will help you with this smart system. It'll help you keep it simple and measurable if you follow this process. So whenever you put content together, ask yourself this. It should include what should the client be doing? Very basically, in simple terms that they'll understand why this will help the client, just to help them understand why they should do it. Even though theoretically you shouldn't have to go and tell that, it makes a difference if they understand it, understand why they're doing something. So briefly explain why they're doing something, don't go into too much detail here. Then how can the client complete the task? So how can they actually do it? What should they actually do? What are the steps they should be doing in order to complete that particular task? If you can't put a how in it, it doesn't need to be in the program. It comes back to what we talked about here. Is it measurable, accountable, results driven? If you can't figure out how they're going to complete something from that, then guess what? It's not results driven because it's not going to drive them towards their results. Then what we want to be looking at is when they should be doing this. It should be a very specific time they should be doing this. Very specific frequency they should be doing this. Again, brings it back to what we talked about here. Is it going to be measurable? Can we hold them accountable? So if we do when, it ticks those boxes off. And then finally, then what to expect next. This is such an important thing here. The client should know what to expect next. Do they have to go and log in again? Do they need to go and press this button? Do they need to do something else? Don't leave them hanging in suspense. That's how you lose clients. Keep moving them on. If you think about YouTube videos, if you think about Netflix, where you get to the end of an episode, it says next episode starts in 5 minutes. It's telling you where to go. This is what's going to happen next. This is what you should be doing next. Same for YouTube videos. This is what you should be doing next. So make sure there's clarity in what they should be doing next. Drive them forward. Keep pushing them forward towards that result. Then when we're breaking all this content down, we need to make sure we do it in a relatively slow manner. We don't want to overwhelm people when we're doing this. So we want to apply this formula, which is assess, apply, accelerate. So in the early part of the program, we assess. So we assess obviously in the gym and the studio, but we can also assess outside the studio. We want to make sure that all the information they've given us is actually correct. A lot of people can write stuff on forms, they can fill in through diaries, they can say they're experienced, but that's their opinion and they're not an expert. You're the expert. So they can say whatever they want to, but then you need to assess what their assessment is. You need to assess to make sure that what they're saying is correct, because they might believe it's correct, but it might not be. So we have to assess it. So we do things during that first phase to assess that. Once we've assessed during that first phase and we make sure that everything they're talking about is correct, we can then start applying what we know is going to work for them. And we apply that over time slowly to see how far we can do it. We're almost stress testing the client to see where we can take them to. Once we've applied that and we understand what's working for them, then we accelerate. We double down on that one. And we keep applying that until it doesn't work anymore. And then guess what? We go back to the beginning and repeat the process. This is the same thing you've probably done with any kind of training. But when you're doing things with the kind of online side of things, when you're not really there with them all the time, it's more important to start doing this because you're not there all the time. You're not just going to be supporting them in those sessions, you're going to be supporting them outside those sessions too. So what did it look like? Well, this was a very brief overview of it. I'm not going to run through it in any particular order on here. I just want to bring up on the screen to show you what that kind of 6-week process looked like. So you can see here we split up in a number of different weeks, how we did it in kind of a couple of phases. And towards the end of the phase, that's when we started to progress things a little bit more. And the actual process we're using here was based what we call a super system offer. So basically, we start with a front end offer. In this case, it was 6 weeks. For online, we generally do a little bit longer, but for gyms and studios, 6 to 8 weeks seems to be working well. And then we'd move them into a back end offer, into a subscription membership. This is like dating. So imagine you go and date somebody. You wouldn't just go straight into a marriage and commit to them long term. You'd normally go on a few dates with them, but you'd be committed to them. You're not going to see anybody else, but you've gone a few dates with them to see how it goes. That's what your front end offer is. It's to get them to know you and for you to know them without making too big of a commitment to them. A commitment where you can still walk away if you really, really want to. Where after this, you can go into a subscription membership. The relationship's been built up. You want to stay with them for the long term, so they're going to commit to you for more long term. And this front end offer wants to be designed to do that. So we've structured it in a way following that process we talked about there. We've also included things in there as well with an aim to move them into that back end offer. So you can see here roughly around week 4, that's when we want to start making that back end offer. You shouldn't be waiting, no matter what the length of your program is, more than 7% of the way through. That's probably the sweet spot. 65, 75% of the way through, that's when you want to be making your first offer for the back end. You do want to be drip feeding things a little bit earlier on as well, just to future pace the client into that something else is coming. The first offer wants to be made around that kind of point of it. So yeah, around 70, 75% is normally about right. Now I talked about those touch points a little bit later on. If we look at the top one here, these are the touch points that our gyms had on average with their clients, working with them 2 to 3 times a week. So before implementation of that first 6 weeks, they had 3 to 4 touch points, micro touch points in the first week. So there's some onboarding stuff there. And it was 2 to 3 every single week consistently after that. When we implemented the online side of this, you can see the difference. There was 17 micro touch points the first week, then 12, then 20, 27, 14, and 10. So there's lots of things here where the client is starting to be more interactive with us. There's different things they're going to be doing. And it goes up and down doing that, because we also know in that 4th week there, we're going to be making the offer. We also know there's going to be lulls coming in. So we're doing things in the program to make sure that the adherence stays high, to make sure the retention is more likely to actually happen. And by having these small micro touch points, you always know that you're there all the time. Now, there were a couple of other things we added into this. The last one was missed session follow-up. So this is really important if you do have like a small studio gym, or even if you're working with, doing one-to-one, face-to-face stuff, you need to be having some missed session follow-up, a process that you actually go through. So in this example here, we had a couple of different things we set up that almost gamify the process. So a lot of these gyms had a way of clients checking in. They use QR codes or something similar to that, or a fob. So what we could do using the software that they had is create some automations from it, where if the client didn't check in for a session they booked for, it would automatically follow with that client, and it'll do a number of different ways. So a no response, it would first check with the client to make sure they're okay, see where they're at, and then eventually it'll go through a process. If they got ignored completely, it'll be added to the PT that was assigned to look after them. Because one of the things that a lot of our studios and gyms doing, if you had multiple PTs, is not just saying go and train with them in these sessions, was actually to make sure that someone's job, it was like you're assigned these clients. It's not your job to look after them during the sessions, it's to make sure they stay with us for as long as possible as well. So we made sure that trainer or that coach or whoever it was told automatically when it got to that stage, if it did get to that stage. But a lot of the time was finding that this process was dealing with it quite easily. Now, if there was no response, it would trigger, like I say, eventually the coach to actually follow up. If adherence was becoming a problem, then it means we could look at the data and then we can make certain offers to them to make sure it fits. Because a lot of the time, it's only 1 or 2 small things that reduces adherence. A lot of those things can be tackled. So, for example, maybe you're struggling with session times, so you can move them to a full online offer. There's lots of different things out there, for example, you could do, but that's just one example. The other thing we looked at doing on here is on what we found is that we could actually not just trigger messages to go out to the client, is that we'd encourage things inside the app. So these small groups we've got set up as well. If somebody missed it, it'll pop in there and say like 4 out of 5 of you made it, or 4 out of 6 of you made it for today's session. So you've got 4 points. Very quickly, those people will be there helping, supporting, and finding out where they are to try and get them back on track again. So again, it was really useful having these automation stuff put in place. Now, there's also the possibility that people believe in and I'll say leaving, they'll be going on holiday and things like that. So these might be planned missed sessions. So of course they wouldn't be booking in for these, but you could also have things paused if you needed to allow it to happen. The other thing we started to set up as well is having a holiday version of things. So for example, there's groups and front end offers you saw there, the back end offer stuff, there was content already pre-built out that they could just swap out for clients when they were on holiday, and it supported them whilst it was actually away, and then brought them back into the fold again once they came back off holiday. Again, all this stuff was automated. One last thing I haven't mentioned already, but I do think we should talk about here is also offboarding. Like, clients will leave your gym from time to time. It just happens. People will leave. We do all the best things in the world, but people are going to leave at some point. So why do people leave? That's the first question you want to ask yourself. Well, sometimes it's going to be because they're struggling to commit to the sessions offered, in which case you could offer an online program, fully online program, as I mentioned already. But it could be they're leaving town, just leaving the area, in which case you can still offer them an online program. And because they've already kind of pre-warmed up to the idea of doing stuff online, it's going to be the easiest transition in the world for them, and they shouldn't really question it too much. It's going to be a lot easier sell here. They still get the community, they still get all the support, they can still be in those small groups if they want to be, and they can still be committed to all that outside of that gym environment. So there's some pretty cool things you can do with that. So here you also have the opportunity to do things like not just low ticket online offers, but offer a premium online coaching service too, which has a lot higher margins than your face-to-face. A lot of people go straight into low ticket online offers. I'm not going to talk too much about that here. I will talk about another video about best route to go with these things and the differences between them. Like, both work online, low ticket, high ticket, medium ticket, all works. It's just things you need to know about each one of them. But in this kind of thing here, I wouldn't bother with low ticket. I don't think you need to. I think because you've already nurtured them beforehand, you can go straight into high ticket premium services with your clients, or at least have higher margins. When I say high ticket, it actually means higher margins. So lots of options there. So let's take a look, actually, talking about margins, what actually happened. Let's look at the actual data. So after we implemented these systems, the average gross profit margins of our beta studios over the 12-month period that we looked at the data, this is what happened to them. So the revenue per client stayed the same. We kept it the same, 150 and 150, just for this data. The average cost per client was 65. We dropped it down to 40 to 50 pounds, roughly around sort of 46, I think it was on average, but roughly around that mark we tend to do for all the gyms. The gross profit per client went from 85 to around to 100 to 110 pounds. So the gross margin changed from 56% to somewhere between 66% and 73%. So that was on average per client per month an extra 15 to 25 pound without increasing prices, doing absolutely nothing other than increasing prices. That was just on the margins. We then had lifetime value. So because we improved retention, and then we not only increased the margins, we also increased lifetime value. So the average retention in months was 7 to 9 for these gyms before. The average now is beyond 12 months. We had to stop tracking after 12 months, but it's beyond 12 months. So some of this will still keep going now. So based on just that 12-month data alone, the average lifetime revenue of a client was between 1,050 and 1,350. We increased that to 1,500 to 2,100. So that's an extra 450 to 750 pounds per client was making. And again, nothing has changed. No extra costs, just more value, no extra delivery, and a higher profit per client based on lifetime value. And of course, the general margins for that client as well have been increased. So when you start adding that up, it's quite a big difference. Imagine what that can make a difference to your business. Now, there's other revenue streams you can get from this as well. So it's not just about increasing margins, increasing lifetime value. A lot of the other gyms we work with, they started adding some of these as part of our kind of, well, where we include our Done For You service anyway. So by having an online system in place, you can do things like increase your prices easily for both current and new clients. One of the hardest things to do with gyms is to increase prices on clients, especially if you don't have anything in your contract, which you definitely should do. At the end of the day, inflation's inflation. It's always coming. It's always going to be there. You have to put your prices up, because every year you don't, you're eating into your profits, and eventually you're going to lose out. So you have to put your price up at some point. By adding in something like this, makes it a lot easier. So all the gyms we've spoke to are going to be putting their prices up in this year. Some have done it already. They can make it a lot easier because they say, oh, we've been adding this into it. Look at all this extra value now getting. We need to put these prices up. Explain reason why. But they've got all that extra value there, so it makes life a lot easier. And especially for new clients, there's a lot of added value already. So from a sales perspective, it's like, wow, we'll get all this stuff. So it makes it a lot easier for price increases. It also makes it a lot easier to upsell to higher tier coaching, which is what we talked about. That can give you an extra 50 to 100 pound a month in some cases from what we were seeing. And then also you can add on things like online only memberships. So as I mentioned, it's not always the best way to go about it, but some of the gyms are trying this at the moment where they have an online only membership. They can join on the front end. It's low touch. It's very, very scalable. And it allows you to do something called an ascension model, which allows you to upsell them into the face-to-face stuff, high ticket programs and things like that too. It allows you to keep clients on whilst they travel more, which we've talked about already. It's also allowed them to sell add-ons. So some have been adding like nutrition add-ons on, lifestyle add-ons on, and actually started splitting things up a little bit so people can choose the different things, especially if you've got like mobility issues and things like that. It's been quite good. And also what we've noticed is some people have been running kind of virtual coach service. I thought this was really good with gyms with kind of stations. So if you've got like a station in your gym, like 3 or 4 stations or whatever it is, and people just work out those stations, these kind of virtual coach services allow them to come up, scan something with their device, and it gives them their workout on there. And their workout's just for that actual station that they're on. So basically, they get kind of a mini virtual coach, all automated, taking them through the workout they're supposed to be doing on their specific station. Works really, really well. And another one I thought was a genius idea was an open PT service. So again, if you're inside the gym and you've got your program that's been delivered to them, great for the back end memberships this is. And let's say you're struggling with something. On your app, when you go in, it can pop up as a message saying, hey, Joe Blogg's trainer or your trainer is in the gym between these hours. So you go into the gym, you're training your workout, I'm really stuck on this. Press the button on the app. Guess what? Your trainer pops out, comes sees you, helps sort out whatever you need to do, and off they go. And that way you can have one trainer dealing with so many people, giving a one-to-one style service, but on a much scalable model. So there's some really cool things that people have introduced for all this kind of online process. So what's the final takeaway from this one? Well, if you add online coaching and automation to your studio model or face-to-face model, you're going to get high margins, up to 15% I'd expect. Around £300 to £700 extra lifetime value LTV per client. Time savings across onboarding, support and admin, more flexible, resilient business model, and all without raising your core prices. So pretty good. So what could you do? What could you take away from this one today? Well, if you're going to take anything away, I'd try and identify 1 to 2 areas in your coaching model that you can digitize this month. If you're going to start anywhere, look at things like onboarding, checking on nutrition support. They're probably the easiest ones to do. And as always, if you want help setting this up, we can actually go and do it for you. That's exactly what we do over at PT Ninja. We build this stuff out for you, create it or deal with it or figure out what you need to do. If you want that, literally just get in touch. You can drop me a message anytime. You can send me an email at ash@ptdninja.com, and we'll put the details around here as well for you to contact us somewhere around this video if that's something you're interested in. But yes, there you go. So I hope today's video has been helpful. I know it's been a long one, but I really wanted to come share with you what we talked about last week over at the FitPro Summer Summit. As always, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire away into the comments. Make sure as well that you do like this video. Make sure you do comment. It really helps. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe, put the notifications on. It makes a big, big difference to people seeing this as well and getting the word out about what we're doing, how we actually help people. So if you could do anything to support us, that would be absolutely amazing. Just pressing that button makes all the difference. So thank you very much once again, and I shall see you at the next episode.